because it's not just a want, it's a necessity. And we don't even necessarily know how much we've missed those pieces and how desperately we need them.
Get your daily dose of motivation on the Motivational Moments with Michelle podcast. In Motivation with Michelle podcast, you'll get encouraging, uplifting, and life-changing wisdom that will transform your world at your fingertips, 24 hours a day. Get a fuller, deeper revelation of the tools you can implement to see incredible transformation in your life from Michelle Newstetter's powerful teachings. Tune in whenever you need to be edified, uplifted, or a dose of motivation, no matter where you are. Subscribe to Motivational Moments with Michelle podcast with Michelle Newstetter today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud.
Hey there, and welcome to this Wednesday Word of Wisdom. Psychologists often talk about the importance of having a strong social support network, especially when we're trying to, say, reach our goals or when we're trying to navigate through a crisis. But why do you think that is? See, social support, whether it's from a group, whether it's from an individual, it's been shown to reduce the psychological consequences or impacts of stress. And it has a lot of positive functions for us. It enhances things like our immune function. Social networks, whether they're like a formal social network, like joining a church or a social club, or maybe like a more informal type of social network, like meeting up with friends, they both provide us with this sense of belonging, of security, of community. In fact, social supports have really been proven to almost be a literal lifesaver. People that tend to be supported by their close relationships with friends, with family, with fellow members of whatever organization they might be a part of, they find themselves to be actually less vulnerable to health impacts like our mental health, our physical health, like stress disorders. There's a really strong tie between our social supports and some measures of well-being. Even some studies have been done in terms of like cultures where there's sort of that communal perspective or ideology, and it's those pieces that really help to, even when the environment is chaotic, like, it could be war torn, it could be impacted by a lot of, say, severe weather or things like that. But when there's this sense of community, what shifts in us is really important for our overall health. And we notice that there are lower incidences of stress-related disorders in those communities, in those cultures. Human beings, we are literally wired to connect. Neuroscience is proven that we have this deep drive to connect with other people. We as human beings have the most complex, the most interesting social behavior of all the animals. And it's this social behavior that is really a critical part of our resiliency, our adaptive toolkit, so to speak. It allows us to come together to do things that we would not necessarily always be able to do on our own. That's the whole idea of it takes a village, right? We share what they call mirror neurons that allow us to match each other's emotions unconsciously and almost immediately, right? This is all about how we connect. And we almost like leak our emotions to each other. If you've ever walked into a room and you've said like, man, I could just cut the tension with a knife, right? Like we feel this intensity of emotion. And we almost anticipate and then mirror each other's emotional states, movements, especially when we're in agreement with one another. And we can mirror even things like each other's brain activity when we're engaged in like storytelling and listening. Sometimes we'll breathe at the same pace, or we'll shift our posture to match the person that we're connected with, right? Physiologically speaking, not having a social support system is actually a source of chronic stress for our bodies. And there are studies that show that when people feel lonelier, they have a higher level of the stress hormones, the glucocorticoids, running through their system. And that type of chronic stress raises our risk of things like cardiovascular disease and other challenges to our health and wellness. Relationships, they can encourage behaviors that are really good for us. Even things like eating right and exercising, right? How many people get like a workout buddy? Psychology says that as part of human nature's default mode is to be social. There's one theory that people have this need to belong. And another way to think about it is something called the social baseline theory, which basically says that the human brain expects access to social relationships. And that's because those connections help us to lower potential risks that we might face. There's that whole idea of safety in numbers, right? And again, it takes a village, a community, whatever. And so when we have people around us, when there's another person present, somebody that we trust, somebody that we feel safe around, it almost makes our world look less like a challenging or difficult place to exist in. So, I mean, I've continuously jumped on my soapbox, so to speak, about self-care. And one of our pieces of self-care is related to our social support network. And we need to kind of start to look at who we have in our world, where they sort of fit. And I mean, we do this whole boundaries kind of teaching about starting to acknowledge who needs to be kind of where in my world, and recognizing too that not everybody serves the same purpose, right? Like some people in our lives are there for different reasons, and they help us navigate through different things in different ways, whether it's just surface level chit chat so that I get some respite from the challenges that I'm experiencing, or maybe it's the person who I can literally, they're my shoulder to cry on. These are all really important roles in our life, but they're different, right? Like they each serve a different role, but that doesn't make any of them any less valuable or important or necessary for our world. Like I said, we are wired for relationship. It's quite critical in terms of how resilient we're going to be and how we're going to navigate through things. Now that we're kind of on a different side of all of the restrictions and COVID and all of that, it's time for us to start to look at, what do I need? Who do I need? And begin the process of slowly reintegrating ourselves back into having a social network. It can be a challenge because it's been so long that I've had to, set these big boundaries with people potentially. And now it's creating comfort again in that area of like developing solid social ties and allowing some of that back into my world, because it's not just a want, it's a necessity. And we don't even necessarily know how much we've missed those pieces and how desperately we need them. So I want you to start to think about this, because a lot of the mental health, like physical health challenges that we face can sometimes stem out of the social world within which we live. And we may need to reevaluate what that looks like for me. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. Obviously, if you want more support in this area, you can always reach out and touch base. See below for some of the resources that we used in terms of creating this content for you. All right. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will be back with you next Wednesday. Bye for now.